What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for joining me. Welcome to an exciting episode, the first episode of the Tribune Show. We are off and firing on all cylinders here on Rokfin and on YouTube. Finally, been tinkering with OBS. It's been a very difficult journey. So, again, I do appreciate you all tuning in. So, we're going to go ahead and dive right in as usual. I got a couple sponsors, got a cool little clip from our Flat Earth Hype Man FMX, and we'll go ahead and get right into the meat of the matter, if you will. So, I do want to just remind everybody that if you're sitting here and you're thinking about what to be munching on, look no further than your handy dandy bag of Truth Smacks, which of course you can go over to truthsmacks.com and grab yourself a bag. And the resource page is what you should really go check out. The information is free, and you can find all kinds of links and resources for, um, how should I put it, censored media, things that YouTube and Google really don't want you finding. So go ahead and head on over to truthsmacks.com, check out their resource page, and don't forget to use your discount code SKY to know that Mr. Tribune sent you. I appreciate you. All right. Also, if you haven't made your way over to the Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac app by Blue Water Bay, then you are missing out big time. They got a lot of crazy updates that you just got to go see for yourself. And while you're there, make sure you use referral Mr. Tribune so that they know that I sent you. Again, I appreciate you folks dealing with the shameless plugging right here at the front of the show. Just going to get it done with. That way you don't have to keep hearing it over and over again throughout. I do like to go ahead and dive right in. Today's topic, as you can probably tell, testing freedom. Now, most of us probably do assume that we are mostly free, but of course not ultimately, not unlimited freedom, if you will, which I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I don't think that, well, let's just say unlimited freedom to me means absolute chaos. So I do think that there needs to be some boundaries that we agree upon. As for who gets to make those rules and all that, we can go ahead and talk about that later on. The way that I'm going to be doing this show and future shows is I'm going to be doing the first half. Hear a little bit of clipping. If anybody can let me know in the chat how the audio is, really appreciate it. But I'm sorry to get distracted, right? Pretty new to this, so I'm sure I'm going to pause a lot, misspeak a lot. It's going to be awesome. You guys are in for the ground floor, which is really, really cool. You get to see me from my rising. I mean, imagine being able to be at the beginning of somebody like Alex Stein or something like that. Which I actually, not to brag or anything, but I was one of the first 4,000 subscribers. Whoopee. All right, back into it. At what point do the systems in place designed to help us actually become bondage? And we'll go ahead and get into that here in just a bit. I do want to go ahead and share this clip. I almost forgot. I do really like this. It was really well done, and done by Mr. FMX, the Flat Earth Hype Man. So we'll go ahead and play this, and then again, we'll go ahead and get right into it. Ooh, hold on a second. Perfect game, right? Nowhere close. Try one more time. All right. There we go. So, back to what we were discussing. The freedom issue is something of the utmost importance because without being able to be free, you cannot fully exercise your ability to figure out what this realm is and how to be in it. So I do think that this is something that is really good for us to go ahead and tackle. Now, some of the subject matter that I'm going to be discussing doesn't pertain necessarily to the entire world, although it can be can be construed as such. A lot of this will do a lot with America, but a lot of our legal systems were founded from the same for places. For example, English law. You can pretty much go all the way back to the Magna Carta and even before that to get some of our legal intent, which is something that's really, really important. I'm going to try not to bore you guys with a whole bunch of legal jargon, and I'm not an expert anyway. So I do want to go ahead and play a clip from a documentary that I seen way early on in my truther days. I've probably seen this back like 8, 9 years ago, maybe more. I'm not even counting the years off the top of my head, but it's a lot. This was done by somebody who's no longer with us, a director called Aaron Russo. Now, for those who are curious, which a lot of you probably already know who that is, but Aaron Russo was a director that got in with a bunch of Hollywood, and even beyond that, actually became friends with the Rockefellers and started dropping all kinds of crazy stuff. So, again, I don't want to talk too much over here on the YouTube side. So, those of you who are joining us on the YouTube, make sure that you go and head on over to the Rokfin. I do have a link down in this very show, so go ahead and check it out. Rokfin is the place to be. They don't censor their creators, and you can hear everything no holds bars. So we're going to be getting into more gravy into the second half, but I do want to go ahead and share this with you. So before I do, let's go ahead and actually get it pulled up. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. All right. So just take me a moment. All right, here we go. Slide it on in, man. It's so easy. Everybody complains about OBS, but honestly, once you get it all set up, it's pretty easy to use. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get this documentary going. I'm just going to play a little bit of it. And you know what? I actually messed up already. I actually want to give you guys the full screen experience. There's no reason why you have to see my ugly mug back here, right? So let's go ahead and pull this up. I'll go ahead and shut the heck up and enjoy the show.
The year was 1913. Woodrow Wilson was president, and powerful banking interests, who had been trying for years, finally achieved their long-term goal of a silent coup d'etat by taking control of the American government. The first thing they did to accomplish their takeover was convince Secretary of State Philander Knox to lie to the American people and tell them that the 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, had been legally ratified by the states when it was not. The bankers knew that this tax would ultimately end up in their pockets. Because of this fraud, the American people were led to believe there was now a tax on their labor. Congress and the president are completely aware of this fraud, and it was even cited in a recent court case. That very same year, the bankers committed their second and by far the most diabolical fraud ever perpetrated on the American people by bribing senators to pass the Federal Reserve Act without the required constitutional amendment.
All in favor, say aye.
They did this during Christmas vacation, when many senators were home celebrating the holidays with their families. And that's how the unconstitutional Federal Reserve Act came into being. They were very clever, and they understood that whoever issued the money for America would control the government. The bankers won, and the American people lost, because most politicians will sell their soul for $1. And now the Federal Reserve could issue dollars legally. As Mayor Rothschild said, "Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws." He knew that he and the other bankers would now control the laws of the nation. Government gave these bankers one of its most important powers, and now had to borrow money from them and pay interest to finance the government. So the American people were forced to lower their standard of living and pay a graduated income tax to the government, just so the government could give these bankers more profits. President Woodrow Wilson, who signed the Federal Reserve Act into law, later said, in regret, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men."
So I don't even really need to go too far into this documentary for you to see a couple things that is, just really, really crazy. We talk about systems that are meant to help us, and at what point do they become, chains that bind us? And here we have, I call it an appeal to authority, if you will, but if you must debate somebody on the matter, we're dealing with people who deal with these matters directly, who know firsthand, who have a lot of experience and a lot of expertise. And when you have, presidents woeing over policies that they enacted, you can tell that there's definitely going to be an issue. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to a point further on in the documentary, because like I said, we don't need to watch this whole thing. A lot of you probably already seen it. But we'll go ahead and get right on to where they're going to interview the commissioner here. And this is pretty important, especially if you're here in America, because the tax system is really, really, in my opinion, fraudulent. The people who work in the IRS are advised to stick it to the taxpayer, and that's not my opinion. That actually comes from somebody on the inside, but more on that later. Let's go ahead and probably right here would be good enough. Let's check it out.
Because I was such a threat to Washington.
You got a driver's license up?
Yeah, I do.
Put that away for me.
After convincing Homeland Security I really wasn't Osama bin Laden, I kept wishing the IRS would allow me to interview somebody. Why wouldn't they show the law? What were they so nervous about? I began to have a frightening thought. What if it was our own government we had to be afraid of? With that disturbing thought in my mind, I went to see a group of tax experts.
You can look through the statutes and look for the law that requires you to pay. And when you do that, you can't identify a law that requires the average person in America who earns a wage and works in private business to pay an income tax.
The Constitution allows for two kinds of taxes. They're called direct and indirect.
The federal government in the Constitution can tax almost anything, as long as it apportions the tax if it's direct.
The indirect.
To kind of clear up some confusion on that, because some people don't know what it means to, oh man, I forgot the brain farting on the word already. That's so funny. the apportioned tax. For something to be apportioned, basically what that means is that the government can like issue an expense for something. Like they can say, "Hey, we need $2 billion for our BS space program," and instead of having people pay a percentage on their wage, that's completely illegal. What they're supposed to do is they're supposed to charge everybody in America a dividend of that $2 billion, if I understand correctly. So let's go ahead and continue.
Tax is for example an excise tax. I can avoid the excise tax on gasoline. I can choose to ride my bicycle. I can avoid the excise tax on tobacco. I can choose not to smoke, or I can grow my own tobacco.
The income tax which is being applied now doesn't meet the criteria of either direct or indirect taxes.
The IRS claims that in 1913, the 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, allowed the government a third form of taxation. What was the Supreme Court's ruling on that?
The Supreme Court in the case of Stanton versus Baltic Mining. I mean, what could be clearer than this? The provisions of the 16th Amendment conferred no new power of taxation.
The Rushauer case also said that the 16th Amendment did not impose any new taxes and did not change any of the taxing restrictions of the Constitution.
There were also several.
Just to pause real quick, that old guy that you just seen speaking, who's also no longer with us, Peter Schiff, he actually died in prison. Just to let you guys kind of know some of the game that was being played back then. Not that you shouldn't stand up for your rights, but just that these people did in fact have everything on the line.
Other major Supreme Court cases in that same period from 1916 up until about 1923.
Stratton Independence versus Hobart, Southern Pacific versus Lowe, Bowers versus Kerbo Empire, Burnett versus Harmel, Doyle versus Mitchell.
It's actually very simple. Congress tried to enact an income tax in 1894. The Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional. When the Supreme Court says something is unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional. They tried again in 1913, and the Supreme Court said the 16th Amendment conferred no new power of taxation. So, if they didn't have it then, and they didn't get it, they don't have it. There is no constitutional basis for a tax on the wages of Americans living and working in the 50 states of the Union.
Not legal or financial advice, by the way. Just going to go ahead and throw that disclaimer out here right now while we're still on the YouTube.
Period. End of argument.
I have a letter here from Daniel Inouye's office of the United States Senate that says, based on the research performed by the Congressional Research Service, there is no provisions which specifically and unequivocally require an individual to pay an income tax. Period. End of story. There is no law, and to date, nobody has been able to show that there is a law for the average American citizen working day in and day out to pay an income tax.
The definition of income in the Constitution was given in the Eisner versus Montgomery case, and it turns on gains or profits that are made from some activity.
Doyle versus Mitchell, 247 U.S. 179, 1918. Here's what he said. The idea of gain or increase arising from corporate activities. In other words, it doesn't mean wages, it doesn't mean dividends, it doesn't mean alimony. It means a gain or a profit arising from corporate activity.
These liens that are recorded against people by the government for tax liens are nothing more than allegations. They are non-substantive. They have never been determined by a neutral third party, such as a court, to have one shred of validity.
If you ever get a notice of an audit or anything else, the first thing you should do is a Freedom of Information Act request for records that they're using to substantiate or justify the audit.
There is nothing in the Internal Revenue Code that creates any such thing as an income tax evasion or crime. There's nothing in the code that allows IRS agents to seize property. The government is involved in judicial blackmail. The government knows that if it legally seizes somebody's property, that person doesn't have the funds and he can't even get a lawyer Who can help them?
I conducted investigations in the Title 18, the Criminal Code, the U.S. Criminal Code. And in there, the statutes and the regulations are very specific as to what's violating the statute. In the Internal Revenue Code, Title 26, there's nothing specific in there. I mean, even the FBI.
So I know what you're probably thinking. You know, if there's no law and it's completely illegal and it's not been substantiated by a court, then how is it that all these people are going to jail for it? And what should we actually do? And that's really the most important thing that we should focus on is what should we do? But again, I don't want to talk too much on this side, so I do want to go ahead and let this play. There's a part in it where it actually, Aaron Russo interviews the ex-IRS commissioner, and it's coming up very shortly. So go ahead and get right back to it.
FBI fear the IRS.
You have to understand that an agency which will unlawfully impose a tax that doesn't exist is not going to care. If we, the people, don't know what our rights are, they're not going to tell us.
If Americans just learned that the IRS was actually knowingly deceiving them, that would be enough for them to rise up and put a stop to it.
This small booklet.
That man that you just seen was Joe Bannister. He actually used to be a gun-toting IRS enforcer, and he actually ended up resigning when he found out what the laws actually were, which he did so very classfully with a letter to his commissioner. So let's continue.
Includes the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. This is a document that every citizen should read. It's a document which freed an entire nation. This is the Internal Revenue Code, and this document, and the unlawful application of this document by the Internal Revenue Service has enslaved the nation that this document attempted to free.
I was very impressed with the people in the tax honesty movement. They weren't kooks. They were highly intelligent, well-researched, and very genuine. I was wondering why I never heard about all these Supreme Court decisions in the media. So I really wanted the IRS's point of view, because to get the true story, it was imperative I hear both sides. I kept wishing Anthony Burke would call me back. He seemed like an honest man. I then proceeded to call my message machine.
Hi, this message is for Aaron Russo. This is Anthony Burke at the Internal Revenue Service. Let me suggest some people that you might want to think about talking to. One would be Don Alexander, who's a former commissioner who's here in town in Washington. Another would be Sheldon Cohen, who is both a former commissioner and former chief counsel. All those guys, I think, can answer your question about, where in the tax law it says that you have to pay taxes.
Wow, good news, I thought. So I called Sheldon Cohen because he used to be the IRS commissioner. He wrote the tax code, and he was also general counsel to the IRS. He is a true expert, and I couldn't find a better person to answer my questions. He graciously agreed to my interview. The reason I'm doing this documentary is because there are many people in America today who believe that there's no law that requires them to pay an income tax or file a 1040. And there are many people going to jail for it, fighting over it.
The Internal Revenue Code is authorized by the 16th Amendment.
I think it should be clarified. I think government should be transparent to the people. Why doesn't the IRS commissioner sit down with them and just explain it in clear English? Why?
I don't think they really care. I think they're just playing word games.
You don't think they're sincere people?
No, I don't think they're sincere people.
What does voluntary compliance mean? And why does the IRS code say it's voluntary to comply, not mandatory?
That's a word euphemism we use. We use voluntary compliance when we talk about traffic signals. Most people at 2 o'clock in the morning, do you stop at a red light?
Yeah.
Is there a cop there?
Well, sometimes I don't.
Well, I do, and most of us do. Most of us do.
Right.
But that's voluntary compliance.
That was a complete perversion of logic. Traffic laws state that it is mandatory to stop at a red light. The IRS code says it's voluntary to comply. Mandatory and voluntary are the complete opposite of each other. Yet he wants us to believe that they mean the same thing.
The important thing to notice with that exchange is that you notice how Mr. Sheldon did not respond with an actual legal rebuttal. Instead, he responded with a logical fallacy, which should tell you a lot about the situation. Now, I'm not recommending anybody go out there and not pay your fair share, your taxes. But this is just stuff that is really, I feel, really important for people to know. So let's continue.
So can the government criminally prosecute somebody of information put on their 1040?
Yes.
Right, so doesn't that violate the Fifth Amendment?
No.
But the Fifth Amendment says I don't have to do anything that incriminates myself.
Well, it doesn't incriminate you to put your income down.
But you said before I could be put in jail for it. The commissioner wants us to believe that
Easy gotcha. Easy gotcha.
although the IRS demands that you fill out the 1040 and you can go to jail for it, that they are not violating your Fifth Amendment rights of self-incrimination. That is absurd. Isn't it true that the word income is not defined anywhere in the Internal Revenue Code?
The law says that the government has a right to tax income.
Oh my goodness, look at him struggle. He's had to stare off into space for at least 2 minutes there, like a zombie, before coming up with this rebuttal. Check it out. It's terribly weak.
Income from any source derived.
So, but the word income is not defined in the code. It just says income without a definition
That's right.
of what income is.
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
But there are many different kinds of taxes. Well, how can an American citizen know what income is if the code doesn't define it?
At first, you see how happy he was when he mentioned how many taxes there were. He's like, yes, all these taxes. We're so good at what we do. And then he goes back to dumbfounded, desperately trying to search for an answer that would at least appear to be legal, right?
If they're paying an income
Because
tax,
the courts have all defined it.
Do you remember what constitutional attorney Edwin Vieira said?
The definition of income in the Constitution was given in the Eisner versus Montgomery case, and it turns on gains or profits that are made from some activity.
So the Supreme Court has ruled income is not wages, it's not labor, it's gain from corporate activity. I believe that a man's labor is his private property.
That's your view, but it's not the law.
The Supreme Court's even said your labor is your private property. When I go to work for somebody, it's a trade. It's an even exchange. I do some work, you give me some money.
In 1916, we had the Brucheva case and the Stanton case. And the Brucheva case and the Stanton case said that the 16th Amendment gave the government no new taxing power.
I'm not going to argue the niceties of that with you.
And it came up again in a case called Peck versus Lowe, where the Supreme Court said the 16th Amendment did not extend Congress's taxing power to any new or accepted subjects. In other words, if you weren't taxable before the 16th, you weren't taxable after the 16th.
Today I interviewed a juror, okay, who sat on a case, and they found the person not guilty for lack of filing, okay? And I asked her why they found him not guilty. And she said because the IRS couldn't show us the law that made him liable to file a 1040.
All they need to do, if there is a law, is to show us the law, which of course they never did.
And the reason they didn't do it was why?
Because there is no law.
Title 26 requires you to file a return.
But doesn't Title 26 have to be in compliance with the Supreme Court decisions?
You're going to take a 1920 case and superimpose it on the whole Internal Revenue Code that was written after it? No, that's not.
I can't believe what I just heard. Rewind.
You're going to take a 1920 case and superimpose it on the whole Internal Revenue Code that was written after it? No, that's not.
Remember he said earlier the Internal Revenue Code was authorized by the 16th Amendment?
The Internal Revenue Code is authorized by the 16th Amendment.
Remember, the Supreme Court said the 16th Amendment did not give the government any new taxing power. These decisions have never been overturned. Let's listen further. Can the lower courts overrule the Supreme Court?
No.
How are they putting people in jail today for not paying a tax on their labor when the Supreme Court said they don't have to? Doesn't the IRS code have to be in compliance with the Supreme Court? That's my big
Aaron,
question.
this is a waste of time.
Well, let me
Because whatever I say, you're not going to believe.
He's right.
And there you have it, folks. The rage quit. I'm going to let him finish rage quitting here, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up this and move on to the next thing. But you guys definitely get the idea, at least as far as certain laws go. It's like they're pretending that there's a legal system that isn't actually legal, which is pretty funny. All things considered. It's not funny, but it is. We'll laugh it off for now. Let's go ahead and let him finish rage quitting here.
I don't believe him, and neither should you. He wants us to believe we should obey the IRS code, which is being enforced in violation of the many Supreme Court decisions. If the Supreme Court made a decision...
Thank you, Aaron. I think we're finished.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen, you're doing that.
Well, I'm sorry that you constantly re-argue the point. You're liable because the law says that you're liable, and the courts say the law says you're liable, and that's why you're liable.
You see, he's talking about the lower courts, who are not in compliance with the Supreme Court, as they have to be. Doesn't the court have to be in compliance with the Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court has so held.
Where?
You caught me unprepared.
I'll come back.
By so held, what Sheldon means is that the law has never been challenged in the Supreme Court, and therefore the law has so held. He's actually not talking at all about what Aaron's talking about, which is, again, really, really funny. Something can't be challenged in the Supreme Court if it can't ever make it there because the system's corrupt and the lower courts keep peddling it back.
No, I don't want to do that.
But let me ask you a hypothetical question.
No. You're making silly arguments here.
Why is the Supreme Court decision a silly argument?
Well, because it's inapplicable.
That made my heart stop. He just said Supreme Court decisions do not apply to the IRS. That's the behavior you would expect from a totalitarian country, maybe China or Russia or Cuba. Not from America. They're just making up the law as they go along. Now I knew the tax honesty movement was right. The IRS thrives on intimidation and fear, not by law. It's no different than a criminal protection racket, using force to extract your money from you. Then the former IRS commissioner, now working at a prestigious Washington law firm, threatens me. Watch.
Aaron, you understand Yiddish. Cornish helfen.
For those of you who don't understand Yiddish, that means nothing will help you. Now it all became clear. I understood why the IRS wouldn't go on camera.
There you have it, folks. And some of the other things that they show in this are actually like news. Like people went on Fox News and stuff and were challenging that there was no law. And really at every single turn, the IRS just completely failed and fell flat on their face trying to show that there's a law. It certainly can seem like there's a law when you look at certain passages of it, but as Aaron pointed out, everything has to be in line with the courts and, the Constitution and the amendments, and they're just not. It doesn't seem like the way they are now. So, there actually is one other person in this documentary. Let me see if I can just find her real quick. Maybe we watched quite a bit of this. My goodness. All right. Let's go ahead and see where she's at. Oh, going pretty fast. And I can't find her. That's all right. We'll go ahead and... Oh, wait. There at the end. That's okay. All right, we'll go ahead and exit this. Go ahead and get back into OBS. Awesome. What a fun time we're having, guys. I appreciate you all being here. We have nice 2 people over on YouTube. This is awesome. And then we have 4 people over on the Rokfin. You know, I am competing with the Witsit stream and pretty soon a Melodome stream, so can't really complain. I do appreciate everybody being here, and I'm sure these numbers will grow over time. Feel free to chat it up, chop it up. I am in both the chats, so I will talk as I can. But let's go ahead and get into this next thing here. So there was somebody else in that documentary I wanted to point out. Her name was Sherry Jackson. And she was also somebody who worked in the IRS who had resigned after she got several letters asking her to provide a law. And, of course, her boss told her that, you know, you probably should just resign. So the reason why I bring them up is because even though it may be true that the income tax is unlawful, it is also true that people have been going to jail. And one of those people who did go to jail, 2 of those people actually are in this documentary here, Peter Schiff and Sherry Jackson. Sherry Jackson, I believe, only served a 4-year sentence, but still, the fact is that you're losing precious, precious time, which definitely would be the opposite of freedom, in my opinion. I know it's really funny. Some people out there are going to say, oh, he's saying that you should go ahead and go to the government, blah, 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 blah. And if for those who personally know me, that's just really, really funny. One of the things that I hold above all else is personal freedom, and I don't believe that the government has the authority to tell us certain things that they pretend that they have the authority to tell us. But I digress. Let's go ahead and take a look at part of the solution, mind you. We've actually have been going for quite a bit now. I don't want to take too long on this stream, so we're going to go ahead and cut on the YouTube side. So last call for those of you who are on YouTube, go ahead and go to Rokfin.com, find me on Troubling Tribune. You can also find a link in the description of this video. So go ahead and find me over there. The video is free. You don't have to get a paid subscription unless you want to support me and the other content creators like me who are working hard to bring you the good information and maybe just time away from your afternoon. So, oh my goodness. Let's go ahead and take a look here. We got just 2 people over on the YouTube. That's not too bad. We do love you over there, but seriously, I want to see 6 viewers. 6 viewers over here on the Rokfin, and we'll go ahead and cut this YouTube stream. Last call. We're going to be getting into the what I would consider some of the solution. There actually is a reason why Sherry Jackson and Peter Schiff went to jail versus somebody else who also got prosecuted but who won, which would be Mr. Joe Bannister, another person who's in this documentary. There is a reason for it, and I actually learned this reason recently by somebody who pretty much is the source of, not, I can't really say the source because everybody works together in the community, but somebody who worked alongside the tax honesty movement and a lot of the people within that movement. So this is really, really good information, and he's not very popular that I've seen on the YouTube because they just took his channel down. And, you know, usually when somebody's being censored pretty hard, you can bet they're probably over the target. So we're going to go ahead and cover that here in just a moment. Let's go ahead and do a little intermission, play a little song here. It's going to take me just a second because the program wants to be slow right just now, which is absolutely perfect. That's how we want it. Slow at the important times. That's how you know that you got a good computer. Alrighty, where are you at here? Pretty sure that is it. Let's click it. Nice. We're doing it live. We are doing it live. Awesome. I appreciate y'all hanging in there. We will get this going momentarily. Feel free to take a breather, take a break, stretch your legs, get yourself a glass of water or whatever it is that you do. Hopefully this doesn't play just loud as heck right off the bat. That would just be hilariously awful. Yeah, that's it. All right, this song is called Wake Up. It's from the copyright free section, but it was really good, so I thought it would be great for the show. So we're going to go ahead and slide on over to our transition screen, and I will see y'all in just a bit over on the Rokfin YouTube. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time. Don't forget that we are also hosting the True Earth debates. I'll go ahead and do this last little plug before we cut. We are hosting the True Earth debates live on TikTok. Now, with OBS, we may be able to bring it live to YouTube and Rokfin, but no promises. If not, the best way to catch it is on the TikTok. So feel free to subscribe over there. We're growing pretty fast, now up to 11,000. Really want to get to 20,000 soon. And same with the Rokfin and the YouTube. We got to get those growing. The YouTube is actually lagging behind even the Rokfin. Rokfin, woot woot, 500 followers. YouTube, 135. So we got to get those numbers up. Tell your friends. Share the show. I really appreciate the support. Thank you all so much. And let's go ahead and play this song, take our little break, and I will see you in just a moment. Alrighty. That song was awesome. Let's go ahead and. Oh, we are still on the YouTube. YouTube, thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time. Let's go ahead and cut y'all